Hey everyone, welcome back to Corporate Decoder. Today, the Wedbush Series Trust just filed its N-CSR, and I'm seeing some interesting numbers from its latest shareholder report. Quick note, this is not financial advice, just my take on public filings for educational purposes. We'll be diving into the performance of 4 of their ETFs, and one of them had a pretty wild start to its life. This filing is essentially an annual report for investment companies, telling shareholders what has been going on with their money over the past year. Wedbush Series Trust oversees a few different ETFs, and this report covers their fiscal year ending the 30th of April. We're going to look at 4 specific funds managed under this trust. First up is the Dan Ives Wedbush AI Power and Infrastructure ETF, ticker IVEP. This one is pretty new, kicking off operations in April 2026. For the short period, it was active leading up to the 30th of April. It saw a return of 14.67%. The index it tracks did slightly better at 14.88%. With the difference mainly due to fund expenses. Its benchmark, the S&P 500, returned 9% over the same time frame. It is important to remember this fund only operated for about 3 weeks leading up to the report date, so these returns are not representative of a full year's performance, but rather a very quick burst. The fund was fully invested in companies involved in data centers. Electrification and power generation. About 43.7% of its assets were in industrials, with a significant chunk also in utilities at 22.8%. Next, we have the Dan Ives Wedbush AI Revolution ETF, ticker Ives. This fund launched in June 2025 and has a reporting period from its inception through the 30th of April 2026. Impressively, it returned 32.22% over that period. Its index also performed very well, returning 32.02%. The broad S&P 500 index returned 22.06% in the same timeframe. This fund focuses on companies creating, enabling, or adopting artificial intelligence technologies. It was heavily concentrated in information technology, making up 70.6% of its assets, with another 12.9% in consumer discretionary. The narrative here is about the strong gains in AI-related equities, even with some volatility in early 2026 due to geopolitical tensions. Then we have the Wedbush Return and Leadership US Large Cap ETF, ticker EXEQ. This fund also started operations quite recently in February 2026. For the period from its launch until the 30th of April 2026, it returned 3.33%. Its index was slightly ahead at 3.41%. While the S&P 500 returned a stronger 5.77% over the same period, this fund aims to track an index that ranks companies based on how effectively management translates strategy into outcomes. Its portfolio was diversified across sectors, with top holdings in electronic technology, technology services, and finance. Finally, let's look at the Wedbush Laffertengler New Era Value ETF, ticker TGLR. This fund has been around longer, launching in August 2023. For the period from the 1st of August 2025 to the 30th of April 2026, it returned 19.85%, outperforming its benchmark. The Russell 1000 Value Index, which returned 16.39%. On a 1-year basis, it returned a very strong 39.08% compared to the Russell 1000 Value's 29.25%. The fund strategy focuses on old economy companies embracing new technologies like digitization and AI, along with their suppliers. Its top sectors are information technology, industrials, and financials. Looking at the financials, the Dan Ives Wedbush AI Revolution ETF is by far the largest, with net assets of over $996 million. The Dan Ives Wedbush AI Power and Infrastructure ETF is much smaller, with just under $10 million in net assets. The Wedbush Return and Leadership US Large Cap ETF has just over $1 million in net assets, and the Wedbush Laffertengler New Era Value ETF has about $34 million in net assets. In terms of advisory fees paid, the AI Revolution ETF paid out the most at over $5.1 million, which makes sense given its size. The Laffertengler New Era Value ETF paid about $170,000 in advisory fees, and the AI Power and Infrastructure ETF paid around $2,000. Reflecting its short operating period and smaller asset base, the Return and Leadership ETF paid about $1,500 in advisory fees. The sector breakdown highlights the different strategies. The AI Revolution ETF is heavily concentrated in information technology at 70.6%. The AI Power and Infrastructure ETF, as expected, is tilted towards industrials at 43.7% and utilities at 22.8%. The Return and Leadership ETF also shows a significant portion in information technology at 29.5%, followed by industrials at 15% and financials at 13.1%. The Laffertengler New Era Value ETF, while still having a good chunk in information technology at 25.6%, is more diversified with financials at 15.7% and industrials at 15.6%. The auditors, Cohen and Company Limited, gave a clean opinion on the financial statements, meaning they found them to be fairly presented. They've been auditing funds advised by Wedbush Fund Advisors since 2025 and the predecessor fund of Laffertengler since 2023. There is a detailed section here about the board's review of the investment advisory agreement, particularly for the AI Revolution ETF. They considered the quality of services, costs, profitability, and economies of scale. The board apparently found the terms fair and reasonable, approving the agreement for an initial 2-year term. They noted that the advisor was responsible for paying most of the fund's expenses out of its advisory fee, which is a common structure. They also acknowledged that for new funds, economies of scale are hard to predict but plan to review expenses as the fund grew. When we look at the financial highlights, the AI Revolution ETF started with a net asset value of $25 per S-Hair and ended at $32.92 per S-Hair, a solid increase. The AI Power and Infrastructure ETF also saw its NAV grow from $25.03 to $28.70 in its very short operational period. The Return on Leadership ETF went from $24.83 to $25.66, and the Laffertengler New Era Value ETF over a longer period increased from $33.10 to $38.94. The expense ratios for most of these funds are around 0.75% annually, except for the Laffertengler New Era Value ETF, which has a slightly higher ratio of 0.94%. This is a key number for investors to watch as it directly impacts their returns. For the AI Revolution ETF, there was a net investment loss of $0.12 per S-Hair. This is not uncommon for funds, as advisory fees and operational costs can sometimes exceed the income generated by the fund's investments, especially in the short term or for funds focused on growth rather than income. The AI Power and Infrastructure ETF also reported a net investment loss of $0.01 per share. The Return on Leadership ETF, however, showed a slight net investment income of $0.01 per share. The total return figures are certainly eye-catching. The AI Revolution ETF delivered a 32.22% return. The AI Power and Infrastructure ETF had 14.67% over its brief period, and the Laffertengler New Era Value ETF showed a 18.62% return for its latest period, and an impressive 39.08% over the last year. Overall, it seems Wedbush Series Trust has launched some very specific thematic ETFs. The AI-focused ones are showing strong performance, albeit with very short operating histories for IVEP. The Laffertengler Fund demonstrates solid returns, validating its value-oriented, tech-embracing strategy. That is my take. Stay decoded. The research tools I actually use are linked in the description. They help keep this channel going. If you found this breakdown helpful, hit like, subscribe for more insights, and join our Discord community in the description.